3.5 years into what was meant to be a lightning-fast campaign, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has turned into a grinding, exhausting war of attrition. What was promised to be a 3-day or 2-week operation has stretched into one of the most devastating and costly conflicts of the century. Vladimir Putin's so-called special military operation has transformed into a struggle for survival, and not just for Ukraine, but for Russia's own military machine. After failing to achieve its early objectives, the Kremlin shifted strategy: overwhelm Ukraine with numbers. Russia, after all, began the war with one of the world's largest arsenals of tanks, artillery, and aircraft. But what Putin didn't seem to anticipate was the staggering rate at which this equipment would be destroyed. Analysts now warn that by 2026, Russia could run out of armored vehicles altogether, a scenario that would have been unthinkable in early 2022. According to the independent database Oryx, which tracks visually confirmed losses using satellite imagery and open-source data, by September 2025 Russia had lost more than 2,600 units of military equipment, roughly twice the number of Ukraine's own losses. Out of these, about 13,000 were armored vehicles, including over 4,100 tanks either destroyed, captured, or abandoned. And since Oryx only counts visually verified data, the real numbers are almost certainly higher. When the invasion began, Russia had around 3,300 active tanks and mainly upgraded T-72s, T-80s, and T-90s, and between 5,000 and 17,500 older models in storage, most inherited from the Soviet era. As the war dragged on, newer tanks were lost first, forcing the army to pull increasingly outdated models out of storage. By late 2022, images of T-62s appeared on the front lines. By 2024, even World War II-era T-34s were being deployed. Seeing a tank from the 1940s return to the battlefield in the 21st century perfectly illustrates the desperate state of Russia's forces. Russia's tank production and repair capacity have sharply declined. At the start of the war, factories could restore over 120 tanks per month. By mid-2025, that number had fallen to about 35. The best preserved vehicles were refurbished first, but as those ran out, the remaining ones required massive overhauls and spare parts that sanctions made nearly impossible to obtain. Meanwhile, Ukraine's drone warfare evolved faster than Russia could adapt. In early 2024, Russia was losing about 1,000 armored vehicles per month. By the end of the year, that number had tripled. Drones can now strike tanks precisely from above, bypassing their thick frontal armor and hitting thinly protected areas like the turret or ammunition storage. As Russia fields fewer armored units, Ukrainian drones have greater freedom to operate, hunting tanks with deadly precision. Corruption has only made this worse. Some modern Russian tanks were discovered filled with clay bricks or empty metal boxes instead of proper reactive armor panels. The T-72 and T-90 series, often touted as equals to Western main battle tanks, have serious design flaws, especially their auto-loader systems, which store ammunition directly beneath the turret. A single drone hit in the right spot can ignite the entire ammunition rack, causing a catastrophic explosion known as the jack-in-the-box effect. Then there's the so-called T-14 Armata, once hailed as the future of Russian armor. When it first rolled through Moscow in 2015, the Kremlin promised to produce over 2,000 of them by 2020. But after 3.5 years of war, only about 20 prototypes exist. They briefly appeared near the front in 2023, but were quickly pulled back reportedly because they were too expensive to operate, too unreliable, and too vulnerable to modern drone warfare. If tanks represent one side of Russia's decline, artillery tells an even darker story. According to Reuters, North Korea now supplies up to 100% of the shells used by several Russian artillery units. Between 4 and 6 million rounds have been shipped to Russia, many dating back to the 1970s and 1980s. Ukrainian intelligence reports that nearly half of them are defective or failed to detonate. Russia's own domestic production fell by about 25% in 2024, manufacturing only 2.3 million shells, while its army expends around 10,000 per day, nearly 3.7 million per year. To compensate, Moscow has rushed to build new explosives factories deep in Siberia, nearly 1,800 miles from Moscow, signaling how little confidence it has in its own defenses closer to home. Even so, shortages of TNT and RDX key materials for explosives have already become critical. The aviation industry is collapsing too. Early in the war, Russia promised to produce 1,000 new civilian aircraft by 2030. After 3 years, it has completed only 5. Sanctions have cut off access to Western parts, while engineers and factory workers have fled the country or been sent to the front. The Russian Air Force itself is flying at under 75% of pre-war capacity. RAND reports that the Air Force loses up to 60 aircraft annually simply due to overuse and lack of maintenance, while production adds barely 25 new planes per year. Even Russia's once feared air defense systems are being depleted. The S-300 and S-400, designed to protect against NATO air power, are now being destroyed or repurposed. Oryx confirms more than 340 surface-to-air missile systems have been lost since the war began. In 2024, Russia even began converting old S-300 missiles into crude ground attack weapons, revealing how dire the ammunition shortage has become. These repurposed missiles are inaccurate and unreliable, but Moscow continues to use them out of sheer necessity. Beyond equipment, Russia faces a human catastrophe. Since 2022, it has lost over 1 million troops killed, wounded, or missing. The country is now short hundreds of thousands of workers and engineers. The median age in the defense industry is 45, and barely 16% of workers are under 30. The government promised to open 15 new military training academies, but only to have actually begun construction. The war is consuming not only weapons, but the very people capable of building them. All of this stems from a fundamental economic reality. Russia simply cannot afford to keep fighting at this scale. Oil and gas revenues, the backbone of the Russian economy, have dropped by 35% year-over-year in 2025. Meanwhile, defense spending now consumes 40% of the entire federal budget, starving other sectors of resources. The Kremlin has already signaled spending cuts for 2026, a quiet admission that the war is financially unsustainable. Put simply, Russia is burning through its reserves of soldiers, steel, and money faster than it can replenish them. What began as a confident attempt to seize Ukraine has turned into a slow-motion collapse of its own military and industrial infrastructure. Unless a dramatic shift occurs, experts predict that by early 2026, Russia will face severe shortages of tanks, artillery, and ammunition. The Kremlin's options are limited: scale back operations and risk appearing weak, continue the war and face total exhaustion, or seek peace, a move that could destabilize Putin's entire regime. What we're witnessing isn't just a military decline, it's the unraveling of a superpower built on illusion, corruption, and outdated strategy. The same system that once prided itself on indestructibility is now cracking under its own weight. And to understand how Ukraine managed to dismantle one of the world's largest armies through innovation and persistence, check out our next analysis, where we'll explore Ukraine's revolutionary drone warfare and how it changed the future of modern combat.